Okay, so Module 5, this one is about the analysis of financial statements. So here we're looking at ratios and benchmarking co-op performance. So by the end of this module, you should be able to apply various forms of analysis to financial statements, evaluate the operating performance of the co-op, and identify benchmarks for financial and non-financial reporting. So first of all, starting with financial health and ratios. As with any business enterprise, it's important to evaluate financial health by using ratio analysis. And many of the ratios that are used in for-profit analysis are also applicable for cooperatives. For example, liquidity. Liquidity talks about the ability of your co-ops in terms of having sufficient assets, current assets, to meet its current liabilities. So do you have enough cash to pay for your bills? Coverage. Here you look at debt to equity. So how does your co-op compare to other organizations when you compare the level of debt to the level of equity that the organization has? And then we look at activity. So activity can be, for example, an inventory turnover ratio. So how quickly are you selling your inventory? And profitability, something that applies to everybody. So we're looking at profit margin and return on investment. So in addition to these standard regular ratios, there are also some ratios that are industry specific. For example, you do have certain ratios that apply to the insurance sector and to credit unions and banks. So it's not enough just to calculate the ratios. Anybody can plug numbers into a formula and out pops the answer. You really have to understand what the ratios are telling you. So how do you interpret them? That's really important. So if you have a poor current ratio, if the ratio of current assets to current liabilities is less than 1, this is telling you you do not have enough assets on hand to meet your obligations in terms of paying your bills. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is trend analysis. So it's important to look at the trends. So when I say trends, you're looking at your co-op's performance over the previous, say, 3 to 5 years, and the idea here is to get a sense of whether or not the co-op is improving year over year, or is the co-op's performance deteriorating. And you need to determine whether these trends are caused by something that's external to the co-op or something that can be controlled internally by making different management decisions. So with respect to benchmarking, it's really important to evaluate your financial health by comparing to the industry benchmarks. The challenge, however, for cooperatives is finding comparable benchmarks. So there's a lot of benchmarks publicly available for banks, but not necessarily for credit unions and other cooperatives. So is it really a good comparison to compare yourself to the commercial sector, which has a goal of pure profit maximization for its shareholders, whereas for cooperative, certainly they have to earn enough to stay in business and meet regulatory requirements, if there are any, for the particular type of business you're in, such as a credit union or an insurance cooperative. But you know, you really have to look at what is enough. And this is the concept of enough is something that's explored by in a brief paper by Ian Glassford. He's recently retired Chief Financial Officer for Service Credit Union, and he makes some really good points about what is enough for a credit union. So we have that video there, so have a listen or look and see what he has to say. I think you'll find it interesting. So it is important, certainly, to evaluate the financial health, but the question is, you know, it's very difficult to find those benchmarks. So the information for the Living Lab, in this one, note that you cannot use your own cooperative for this Living Lab. You have to find another cooperative. So what I want you to do for this one is find the industry standard or benchmark for at least 2 ratios in the categories as outlined in the book, so operating performance, liquidity, and financial strength. So this concludes Module 5.